Well, a very good morning and a warm welcome to you all for this morning's Community and Dementia Creating Better Lives in Forth Valley webinar. My name is Alan Crockett and I am the Director of Evidence and Influencing for the Dementia Programme with the Life Changes Trust, and I'm delighted to be able to welcome you today. Your chairs for today will be May Wright and Carice Rutherford, who will start their duties very shortly. And can I tell you, these two are professionals, so wait till you see they perform their duties so well. Before we start, I just wanted to quickly give you the background to today's event, which is one in a series of Creating Better Lives regional events that the Life Changes Trust has been running since 2018. So far, we have visited the Highlands, Grampian, Orkney, the Western Isles, Ayrshire and Arran, and then virtually Edinburgh and the Lothians, Fife, Tayside, and most recently Lanarkshire a few weeks ago. So we're delighted now to be doing the same in Forth Valley. For each of these events, the Life Changes Trust works in partnership with people living with dementia, unpaid carers of people who have dementia, stakeholders, as well as others in the community who support individuals, families or projects. These partnerships really help with the planning and development of each event so that they are meaningful to local communities and are led by local communities. For the last few months, the Life Changes Trust has been working in partnership with individuals and organisations from across Forth Valley to design today's webinar. From this work, the Trust has been learning about what really matters to people living in Forth Valley who have dementia, are unpaid carers or who provide support. So what do people with dementia and unpaid carers say are most important to them? What have been the struggles during the COVID pandemic and what has worked really well? And what perhaps are the gaps in services and provision moving forward? These events are designed to help support local areas and all of us to think about how communities can uphold the human rights of people with dementia and unpaid carers. So that's a wee bit of background to our regional Creating Better Lives conferences and why we do them. And we're really happy this morning, as I say, to be hosting this time in Forth Valley. So that's enough from me just now, because you will be hearing from me very soon again. I'll be back a wee bit later on. So now I'm going to hand you over to the extremely capable hands of our co-chairs for this morning's conference.
Thank you. My name is May Wright, and I'm really pleased to be co-hosting today. Let me introduce Breda Seaman. Now, Breda is sitting alongside me. She is actually coordinator of Dementia Friendly Dunblane, but she's assisting me with the technology. You'll be hearing from Breda later on in the programme. My husband had dementia and I cared for him when there was little or no support available, and I cared for him. When he went into a home in 2013, I enrolled in a seminar at Stirling University for carers, people with dementia and nurses. I asked questions and later was invited to attend some conferences and focus groups about dementia. I was involved with research for neighbourhoods and had regular visits from Dr. Kayindi Manji, who will be chairing the question and answer session today. Dementia Friendly Dunblane started in 2017 and I became a volunteer, and I can't wait for our events to start again. Believe me, as a volunteer, you reap what you sow. And the first thing that happened to me was that I met a lovely lady, and we had been to high school together 70 years before. What wonderful memories we had. Thank you.
And I'm Carice Rutherford. I'm currently a student, however, I'm currently a student, however, when I left school, I moved in with and became the primary carer to my grandmother who has dementia, along with other complex medical needs. I looked after her for 3 years, whilst also working part-time until being accepted into university. And thereafter, my mum Gillian, who you will see in one of the films later on, took over the primary care role. However, last year, during lockdown, as we were all sent home from university and have been home ever since, I would stay with my grandmother on weekends and whenever my mum needed a break. To chair the panel Q&A session later on, we will also be joined by Dr. Kindy Manji, who is the project manager for About Dementia, a forum for people affected by dementia to help them shape policy and practice.
This morning, we will be seeing some films about local projects from across Forth Valley. These films highlight the work and support that is still being delivered during COVID. We will be hearing from Alzheimer's Scotland and how they and their fantastic volunteers managed to raise a huge amount of money to set up a new resource centre to continue to support people living with dementia and unpaid carers.
We'll also be hearing from Our Connected Neighbourhoods, which is a partnership of 14 organisations in Stirling. They are working together to make Stirling Town Centre and the wider area dementia-friendly and inclusive, with people living with dementia helping to lead the project. And Dementia Friendly Tumbling will be talking about the steps that they took to continue their support during lockdown, and some local carers and volunteers will be reflecting on their experiences.
And we will also be sharing what people in Forth Valley say is important to them and what support they need and want in their own communities. But more of that shortly. So a lot to get through, and of course we will have our question and answer session later on this morning.
But we're going to start today by talking about local priorities here in Forth Valley. In a few moments, we're going to hear from Arlene Crockett from the Life Changes Trust, who will be talking us through the work that the Village Storytelling Centre has been doing with people here in the Forth Valley to find out what is most important to them in their communities and what their priorities are for creating better lives. The Village Storytelling Centre has been running storytelling sessions, and they work by using creative methods to support people to tell their story. Storytelling is simply a gentle, practical way to do this. Arlene will tell us more about these sessions and what came out of them, but first, let's find out more about how storytelling actually works. At the Trust's Creating Better Lives conference in Ayrshire and Arran, Sam Rowe from the Village Storytelling Centre explained.
Good morning, everybody. I'm not Arlene, I am Sam, you might notice that. I work for an organisation called the Village Storytelling Centre, and over the last year we've been working with the Life Changes Trust to develop this storytelling approach, which you might have heard being talked about. And so I just want to tell you a little bit about the process that has led us to the priorities that you'll find on your table. We are an organisation that uses storytelling to support communities to find their voice. And we've been working in collaboration with another storyteller called Claire Hewitt, who has a background in the Living Voices project, which worked in care homes across Scotland, gathering stories from the residents there. And so our workshops, which we've been instigating, they normally begin by gathering everyone together, and we always start off with a song and a traditional story. And that just gives a feeling for, this is a different kind of meeting. Claire put it really nicely, I think, when she said people think they're coming to a meeting, and what we try to create is the atmosphere of gathering around a kitchen table just to share. But that story will often have thematic connections to some of the concerns that the group might be carrying, and we'll use that story then to kind of start off leading the conversation. It might be a story about building relationships, or it might be a story about community or a supportive society, and we'll let the kind of ball start rolling with that. So it kind of starts the conversation off from a kind of different and unusual place. Sometimes that conversation is enough. Sometimes people have come to that meeting kind of with a lot that they wish to share, and we just kind of give them the space to speak and to listen. But also we have the option to kind of like move into a next stage, which is to actually use a story creating process to support people to share some of their thoughts and feelings. And that normally revolves around creation of a character. So if we're working with a group of carers, we might create a fictionalized character who shares some of their experiences, who we could imagine being a member of the group that we're sitting in. And that character gives people the space to kind of project onto him or her, some of their own experiences, which gives them the chance to regulate their own level of personal disclosure, but also find the space perhaps to share some things that they might find painful to kind of like to talk about if there was too much personal focus. So for example, in another area, we talked about family conflict. So I don't know if that was happening in the participants' lives, but by being able to talk about this character, we were able to really explore those issues in a really open and kind of supportive manner. The other approach that we might use then is also to kind of introduce an overnight bag that belongs to a person perhaps living with dementia. And in that bag, there'll be all sorts of thematic objects that we've picked up from the previous discussions that we've had. And we'll pass those around the participants and ask them to talk about those and what it might mean to this character who owns this bag. So that might include doctor's letters or a driver's license, which is now out of date, or a set of keys. We might ask who helped pack that bag. And that gives people the space, again, to just sort of talk about some of the things that they have been, that are important to them through the prism of this fictionalized storytelling process. We listen to all these conversations, and then we distill down what we hear into the priorities kind of afterwards, working along with the Trust itself. And then, obviously, this is handed on to you at the conference. And this is the first time I've been able to attend the conference, so I'm really excited to see this next part of the process and how all we've discussed over the last couple of days is going to go forwards, and just to hear your discussions. I'm going to hand over to Anna now, who is going to just introduce some of those priorities that we've identified. So thank you very
much. Well, thank you, Sam, for sharing with us how storytelling works so that people can tell their own story and have their voices heard. As we said earlier, these sessions have been running here in Forth Valley. After the sessions, all of the conversations and stories are gathered and are used to inform a set of local priorities based on what people have told us. I'm going to hand over now to Arlene Crockett from the Life Changes Trust to tell us what the Village Storytelling Centre has learned. Welcome, Arlene.
Many thanks, May. Thanks for the introduction. I want to firstly say a huge thank you to everyone so far who has taken part in the storytelling sessions across Forth Valley, and also to the Glasgow Village Storytelling Centre for hosting them on our behalf. I also want to add that I am not one of the storytellers who would normally present this section of our webinars, but unfortunately today they've not been able to make it, so I hope I do this presentation justice. They have given me some really detailed feedback about the sessions and about their own reflections, so please bear with me while I try to do my best to share this. The Forth Valley sessions today have involved those who support people with dementia and unpaid carers themselves. We have also started our sessions for people with dementia, and the priorities we have today reflect their input so far. However, these sessions are still ongoing, and once they are completed, the Forth Valley priorities will be updated to reflect what people with dementia tell us matters to them, and we will share them again after that has taken place. The storytellers wanted us to say that the stories that were shared with them were laden with love, meaning that these are not just stories, but that we are meeting people at some stage of a volume of moments and experiences that have had a significant impact and continue to do so. There can be resentment, isolation and frustration, but also laughter, shared joy and relief. The storytellers also reflected that carers are the sheer embodiment of rich, interesting characters who are striving to do their best at all times, but are constantly weighed down by the weight of their responsibilities. It's also important to emphasise the importance of a story, not because the content is powerful in its own right, but that it is providing a platform where stories are heard, listened to, and acted upon. It is hoped that the forming of the priorities you're about to hear today demonstrates that there is someone out there trying to listen and indeed speak for those who have shared those stories, as well as provide a platform for their voices to be heard. And so before I go on to present the priorities for Forth Valley that we have so far, I would just like to share a few thoughts from those people who took part in the sessions in Forth Valley about what care means to them. Care is true love. It's keeping someone safe and engaging them as much as you can. It's going above and beyond, becoming an advocate and not just responding to people's basic needs. Care is about providing stimulation. It's about pushing to get what you want, as well as getting people to ask for help for you. It's about taking advantage of opportunities. It's helping people not to fear losing their independence while supporting people to be independent. It's being looked after. It's about challenging the story. As one participant said, there's no ending to the story with dementia. There's only volumes. Care is individualised and recognises the different things that matter to different people. It's being trusted. It's being respected. It's about changing perceptions. It's about being a spokesperson, breaking barriers, encouraging communities. Again, as one person reflected at their session, who helps, who looks after them, who speaks on their behalf? Care means taking a different road. It's taking care of each other's needs. It's putting your life on hold. It's isolating. It's lonely. It's remaining in control of important decisions. It's trying to keep everything as before. It's quite a load. It's learning to look forward, but not too far. Care is at the heart of everything. So some powerful language there and some powerful reflections from the sessions, which I'm sure will resonate with many people in many different ways based on their own experiences, both personally and professionally. So some final reflections from the storytellers was how committed, confident and incredibly passionate those at the sessions were about their needs and the immense strength and courage that they showed in expressing those needs. Words used about the conversations were poignant, overwhelming and reflective, and that the ability for some to identify positive outcomes of living with dementia was striking. And so I'm now about to present the priorities for Forth Valley that we have so far. So, priority 1. A diagnosis of dementia too often leads to feelings of isolation and stigma. Communities need to be much more aware and better informed about dementia. It's nothing to be scared of. So just a couple of quotes from the sessions that have helped us to frame this priority. Friends start disappearing, they steer away from you, and doors start closing. I have dementia. I want to talk about it openly and help change the culture of silence around this illness. So some really important reflections around stigma and isolation, which we're running through a lot of the sessions, particularly those from unpaid carers and people with dementia. Priority 2. Trying to get support can be totally overwhelming. Navigating the sea of bureaucracy with different agencies and being asked to share a story again and again can be very confusing. There is also no consistency across council areas. So a couple of people said, I'd have liked a reply to a phone call or an email. Not having to phone every day for a week or a fortnight to get a response from social work or a district nurse. Not endlessly telling the same story over and over again to different people. We need a one-stop shop where people can get all the info and support they need in one space. How about a community-run information hub? So again, many reflections across all the sessions, and in particular, not just those people living with dementia and unpaid carers, but those professionals and volunteers who gave up their time to be part of sessions too. Those themes were running through all of them. So priority 3. Talking to other people who are also carers or who live with dementia is crucial. They can advise you who to call for support and help you navigate the maze. You only learn these lessons from talking. I can be their voice, tell them who to call, make the call if they need me to. I have been through it too. Let it out, let us know how you're feeling. And peer support is a really, really big thing. It's a big issue. It's something that's really crucial and has been throughout the pandemic, particularly for people with dementia and unpaid carers, because it's helped them live and survive day to day, and it's helped them have some kind of quality of life through this really difficult time. And peer support is as much important for them as it is for those that are around them that support. So it was really good to see this really key theme coming out, and we hope that something can be looked at in terms of solutions moving forward. So on to priority 4. Carers can feel undervalued and patronised by services. They need to understand that when carers call, they are often at the end of their tether or in crisis. Carers need a voice and huge support. So a number of quotes and reflections in our sessions with unpaid carers, and it was difficult for us to try and kind of put some of those quotes together to really reflect, because there was so many to choose from. So I hope we've done it justice. You become a non-person when you become a carer. The weight of caring can be overwhelming, especially when you're tired. People with the best intentions tell you to look after yourself, but you have to support people to get them to do that. And as I say, because of the pandemic, in many ways, we know that unpaid carers in particular have been significantly impacted and continue to be so. So those sessions with unpaid carers that the storytellers supported were very moving, very emotional, and very challenging sessions. So I hope this priority and the others really honour the experiences that they shared. Priority 5. A diagnosis of dementia does not mean you are totally gone, but you need the right support to stay connected and be able to make meaningful decisions for yourself. More structured, person-centred support is needed. And again, we hope that this reflects the conversations that we've had with people with dementia so far, and that we will continue to have with the additional sessions that we've organised. So some quotes. If you don't have that support, you feel powerless. If you understand the person, you can understand how to care for them. My doctor knows me, and that counts for a lot. And I think what we had seen in the conversations was that, you know, the relationship, the time taken to get to know people was just as crucial as the service or support that was offered. So we hope that truly reflects the conversations that we've had so far with people with dementia. And finally, priority 6. There needs to be more emphasis on training and awareness for those who support unpaid carers and people living with dementia. Staff want to do their best and provide the best support for individuals, but they also need to know what other services are out there. And this was quite a significant theme that ran through all of the sessions around connectivity, around awareness, around partnership, around knowing what's out there to avoid that duplication and learning from each other. There's no joined up thinking. Lots of good things are happening, but we as staff don't always know about them. We're not getting it right for our staff. So it was really interesting, but really poignant to hear reflections from staff and volunteers themselves, who said, you know, we want to do our best and we are doing our best, but we need a lot more support to be able to continue, and we would welcome that support in whatever shape or form that it takes. So many thanks to those staff and volunteers who shared their experiences as part of the staff and volunteer session, and also who took responsibility moving forward to be part of the Train for the Trainer workshop in order to look at how their practice might change moving forward in engaging in those conversations with people with dementia and with unpaid carers about solutions. So 6 priorities, which in the session later on will be discussed and debated around solutions and moving forward with Kayandi Manji and those on the Q&A panel. And again, many thanks to everybody who's taken part in the storytelling session so far. We really appreciate the honesty that sometimes can be difficult, but really make a difference to the impact of these sessions. and also the impact in terms of moving that story forward and looking at change. And I'll talk a wee bit more about that later on. So please use the chat for any comments you may have, and also the question and answer button as well for any questions you may have now that you've heard these priorities, which I know were shared in advance as well as part of the joining notes. And again, as I said in my opening statement, we will update those priorities once we have concluded our storytelling sessions with people with dementia. So you may see priorities coming out after the event as part of a post-event email, but we will send an update of those priorities once we've concluded sessions as well. So enough from me, and I'm now going to hand back to Carice to take us forward into the next session.
Thanks to Arlene, that was really important to hear, and a lot of what you spoke about really resonated with me personally as a carer. Our next section will focus on some local projects and take a look at how they have been supporting people living with dementia and unpaid carers in Forth Valley during the COVID pandemic. First, we are going to hear from Alzheimer's Scotland. They and their amazing band of volunteers came together to raise £100,000 to get a new dementia resource centre up and running, so that they could support even more people living with dementia and unpaid carers. The volunteers also helped plan what the new resource centre would look like and what services that it would offer. To tell us more, here are Justine Nicholson and Donna Patterson from Alzheimer's Scotland and volunteer Caroline Crawford. Over to you.
Hello, I'm Donna Patterson and I'm here today with my colleague Justine Nicholson. We're both dementia advisors for Alzheimer's Scotland, covering Forth Valley. We've invited Caroline Crawford, one of our wonderful dedicated branch volunteers, along with us today to tell us about the exciting work and developments that they've been working on in the Clackmannanshire area for our new resource centre. So Caroline, can you tell us a little bit more about your role within the branch and what the branch do?
Yes, thank you, Donna. I've been chair of the Stirling Clackmannanshire Volunteer Branch of Alzheimer's Scotland for several years, having previously been on the committee for probably about 20 years. Our main activities were small fundraisers and supporting the service by volunteering at things like musical memories, the memory walks and any other events the service were running. We also ran a monthly evening meal at a local hotel, which provided good social interaction for the person with dementia and their carer or one of their relatives in an informal setting where they could speak to others who understood their situation. We've always worked very closely with the local service.
Yeah, and it's been wonderful to see your participation in so many of the events and activities that are going on in the community. It's been a pleasure to get to know you all over the past few years as well. It's been some wonderful work.
Caroline, can you tell me why the volunteers felt it was important for them to be involved in the planning of and development of the Dementia Resource Centre, and what impact being involved has had on you and the other volunteers?
Yes, well, when Alzheimer's Scotland decided to open a new resource centre locally, we felt as a branch it was important to support it and decided we would try and raise £100,000 towards the fitting out of it. We gave ourselves a year to raise the money, which was quite daunting and very ambitious when we compared it to our smaller fundraising efforts in the past. The volunteers felt it was important for them to be involved in the design and the needs of the resource centre, as they had experience living with a person with dementia, and we felt that as present and past carers, we knew what we would like to see being offered had it been us. It was important to us that the centre catered not only for the person with dementia, but also the carer, and this influenced our reasoning that there should be a therapy room to be used for relaxation treatments within the centre. Alzheimer's Scotland involved us at every stage of the planning, from sourcing suitable premises to the ultimate design. Being involved gave us a real sense of purpose and a determination to reach our goal for such a worthwhile project. It was a lot of hard work organising so many fundraisers, but without the commitment of the branch volunteers on board, the local community and the businesses, we may not have succeeded.
Caroline, can you tell me a little bit more about the future coming up and what impact the volunteers anticipate the centre will give them and the community going forward?
Well, instead of being a branch of Alzheimer's Scotland, we've renamed ourselves as the Friends of the Resource Centre. And all of us intend volunteering in the centre when it opens and continue with our fundraising on behalf of Alzheimer's Scotland. Previously, there had only been a small daycare bungalow locally and scattered venues throughout the area where small dementia groups met. This resource centre has given the opportunity to bring all these groups together and can also be used for fundraising events. There will also be the opportunity for other members of the community to become involved as volunteers in a very accessible venue.
That's wonderful, Caroline. The level of commitment the volunteers have showed throughout the fundraising process, as well as to see them willing to commit and contribute to the resource centre as it moves forward as well. We certainly couldn't do what we do in the community without the support and the help of our volunteers, and the volunteers are going to play such a pivotal role when this resource centre opens. We really look forward to the exciting times ahead and the projects and the plans that we can put forward to benefit the people who are going to be coming along and using the resource centre. So thank you so much. And we welcome new volunteers coming and taking part in those activities in the resource centre as well. Thank you so much.
Caroline, before we finish today, what would you like people to hear and take away from your experience?
Well, certainly one of the lessons we learned early in our journey was to involve the local press with updates on the progress of our fundraising project, which as a result also helped raise awareness of dementia and boost the number of people attending our fundraising events. In the end, we raised over £100,000, so we have asked that £5,000 of the balance be ring-fenced each year for the next 4 years exclusively for ongoing activities in the resource centre. We interacted with local businesses and found them very supportive in coming on board, and we also received several monetary donations from individuals, churches and several other groups. Having this approach had the added benefit of raising awareness of dementia and the support that is available from Alzheimer's Scotland so that nobody with dementia has to go on this journey alone.
Although without a doubt a lot of hard work, it does sound like there were so many positive moments and a real coming together of local businesses and community groups. And as you said earlier, an important aspect of this is raising awareness about dementia in the local area. I'm now going to hand back to Donna, who'll close this conversation.
Yeah, we've thanked you all the way through this conversation, Caroline, but yourself and the many members of the then called branch have worked so hard to be able to raise this amount of money. You have worked so closely with the community and as Justine said, raising awareness. We can't thank you enough, and we really look forward to the future of us working together. And it's lovely to see that so many doors have been opened with businesses, organisations and people living in the community with the focus of becoming more dementia friendly, dementia aware and having the resources on their doorstep in the community. And the branch have certainly, done a lot of work in bringing that together. These are a lovely example of the fundraising aspect, the volunteer aspect, and what a community can do for its own community when they all come together. So on behalf of all the staff in Forth Valley, we take our hats off to you, and we couldn't thank you enough. And I hope you share our thanks with the rest of the branch members as well. It's very well deserved.
Thanks to Justine Nicholson, Donna Patterson and Caroline Crawford. An incredible effort there, showing just what a community can do when it works together.
So we're now going to hear about another important project here in Forth Valley. Our Connected Neighbourhoods is a partnership of 14 organisations in Stirling who work together to make Stirling Town Centre and the wider area dementia friendly and inclusive. This meant good access to buildings, proper and readable signage, safe pavements and having lots of places to sit. And the great thing is that the project was co-led by people living with dementia themselves. Richard Ward will introduce the project and we will hear from some of the people who were involved. Over to you, Richard.
Welcome to our short presentation about our Connected Neighbourhoods, or OCN, which is a community development project jointly funded by Life Changes Trust and Stirling Council and aimed at creating more dementia inclusive neighbourhoods in the Stirling area. My name's Richard Ward and I'm a senior lecturer in dementia studies at the University of Stirling, and I'm one of the partners in OCN. And because our time is quite limited today, we thought we'd share with you a case study of just one of our projects, but you can find out more about the wider work that we've been doing over the last 3 years by visiting our website, and you can find that by Googling our connected neighbourhoods. So OCN is based on a knowledge partnership with the intention of bringing together different types of knowledge and expertise. So expertise by experience of people living with dementia and unpaid carers has been central throughout the project, but further informed by knowledge of research evidence from an academic perspective and expertise in dementia practice contributed by 14 partner organisations that work with people with dementia in the Stirling area and led by ArtLink Central. So as part of my role on the project has been very much to ensure that OCN has been evidence informed by sharing findings from the wider research and also my own recent research on dementia and neighbourhoods. And I guess if there was one particular finding that I would pull out from this research was the discovery that actually it's people with dementia themselves who are already having the biggest impact on creating more inclusive neighbourhoods. And so this was very influential on the work of OCN by focusing our attention on what people do to create change in their neighbourhood and then finding ways to strengthen and amplify the impact of their work. So to give you an example of how we've gone about this, I'm going to hand over now to Martin Quirk from the Dementia Services Development Centre, who will introduce a case study of some of our collaborative working.
Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Martin Quirk from the Dementia Services Development Centre at the University of Stirling. So I was the environment strand lead for our Connected Neighbourhoods. And the project that Richard was just referring to, where we did a commissioned piece of work for Stirling Council, was, I think, the pride of my involvement in the whole project. So the council, Stirling Council, had commissioned a report on the dementia friendliness or dementia accessibility of city centre council buildings and some of the streets and spaces in between. So we were fortunate enough to win the tender. Within the project, they asked us to do this report and to consult with older citizens as part of the project. But taking on the ethos that our Connected Neighbourhoods has in the first place, we believe that the expertise and experience of people with dementia is central to how we operate. And so we're guided by these principles of co-production, the principle of nothing about us without us. So what we did was we flipped the whole overall process so that we put the participants that helped us with the project actually in charge of the project. So they directed the project and undertook the environmental audits that we did. So we showed them the brief that the council had given us. There was a list of buildings and places they wanted to go to. Straight away, the participants came up with their list, some of which matched, of what their priorities were. And then we supported them in undertaking this report. So because we have people with lots of different abilities in there, we use lots of creative methods. So in some cases we were doing a recorded walking interview. One participant loved wearing the GoPro camera. We had some who did some sketching. And so there was lots of creative methods of collecting this data. And we put this together as a report back to the council. And then this was unanimously accepted and celebrated by the council. But all the while we had built up more connections with some of the organisations around the town. The participants had got a real sense that they were having a real say in the development of their town and their city, and to talk about the matters that were really important to them and get them placed on the table of the decision makers of where they live.
Hi, I'm Kevin Harrison. I'm the director of ArtLink Central, and we're a project co-lead on the Our Connected Neighbourhoods project. And I'm going to talk to you about some of the creative and arts-led work that was involved in the Stirling City audit. Perhaps you're wondering why talk about the arts in a project about making our neighbourhood or city a dementia inclusive one. After all, many of us have negative associations with the arts at school or don't feel confident in being creative. Rather than a talent, let's think about creativity as a muscle that we maybe don't use as often as we can to problem solve, to communicate, to connect, and to see and share things that don't fit neatly into boxes. The arts offers the space to imagine the difference a project can make, the means to connect directly to people living with dementia, even when words lose meaning. They can provide an opportunity to build engagement within a neighbourhood, to tell its stories and those of its residents in meaningful and respectful ways. So this strand of work for us has always been about supporting arts activity in the neighbourhood that actually helps people to connect to their social environment and to the people around them and to place. And so creativity and arts activity have been embedded throughout the audits using filming, GoPros, audio recordings, sketching. And a lot of our tools have been developed with participants to be much more like canvases, open spaces for expression and conversation rather than questionnaires and tick box exercises. And that was one of the most exciting things for us as a team, was to embrace how creativity could be embedded throughout the program, and seeing that the accessibility and freedom of creative engagement as a tool for people living with a diagnosis of dementia to participate directly in all aspects of the program was so effective and inclusive. And it's rooted itself across all the areas of our projects, from the conversation cafes to the modelling of the overall OCN approach.
My name is Margaret Ernest, and I'm retired, and I worked in Stirling Council in the social work department. I took an interest when I retired in befriending, and that was all different types of people with different issues. There was isolation, there was dementia, all sorts of things. And I got contacted by a good friend of mine who worked here as well, saying, there's a project starting at the university, and I think you would enjoy this. So I applied, and they accepted me as a volunteer. And from there, it's just gone from strength to strength. The dementia has certainly been an eye-opener for me, because I didn't realise how much effort had to go into finding things. For example, if you went into the town, the signage is very small. So if you were looking for a particular bus or anything like that, that would be very difficult. The signage in other places, again, is not conducive to people with dementia, because the way the arrows are pointing and things like that. On the walks, we did various buildings and different sites, and they had a whole range of really good stuff and really awful stuff. But we managed, and I really enjoyed that. And then I started taking out a very close friend of mine who had dementia, and we went to different social settings. So I tried very hard to take her places, but I used to do a bit of research first to make sure there was plenty of benches, toilets were handy, the walking, the pavement and that was okay for her. But before I joined OCN, that wouldn't have occurred to me. They've taught me so much about looking through the eyes of somebody with dementia.
My name's Keir Stevenson. I'm the Place Development Manager with Stirling Council, and I've got responsibility for, among other things, place development in the city centre in Stirling, as well as rural towns and villages. So with this project, we were tasked in 2019, there was budget allocated, and we were tasked with making Stirling a dementia-friendly city. So not knowing what that meant or what we were really required to achieve from that, we felt that really getting to grips with where Stirling was as a city in terms of meeting dementia-friendly principles was probably a key thing. So that's really where we went with this. It was a very open and honest assessment that we felt was required of where Stirling as a city was. So this, obviously, colleagues have talked through significantly what was done in terms of the project, the outcome being the dementia-friendly Stirling report. So I think the first thing I would say from Stirling, it was an incredibly well-received report. It was taken to full council in March of this year, and it was very well received, culminating in the council taking the decision that all future projects should align with the principles of dementia friendly. That's the first time that kind of decision's been taken. It really gave us some clear and concise recommendations about how we should be taking forward improvements in placemaking in the city. So some real solid recommendations for us to take forward. And it's also to help us shape our future plans and investment. The work that's been done has now been embedded within our city centre action plan for the next 5 years. And we've already completed spend at Stirling Bus Station with new flooring and information provision. So already we've seen some improvements made as a result of this work. There's further capital spend been allocated as an output of this report to deliver recommendations coming out of the study. And councils also took the decision to provide further funding to extend the principles out with the city centre area. So that would be into rural towns and villages as well. Such was the merit that they saw in the report itself. It's not just in money allocated itself to projects aligned with dementia friendly. I think the council really sees this as central to everything it does now. And I think that came out in the ask from council that any projects or capital developments aligned to the principles of dementia friendly. I think as well as those practical steps, it's about the approach itself that was taken. This is local residents at its heart. Local residents living with dementia, or carers obviously. So it was getting experts in as well as people living with dementia to influence and give us recommendations. So it was a real co-production. And the councillors again felt that was a great approach and it provides us a model for going forward in the future. So I think overall the report's given us a bit of a route map on how we improve the city centre and the wider Stirling area to make it more friendly, more accessible. It will support health and wellbeing, but also support economic growth as well. And one of the really interesting aspects of this report was while it was local residents that were involved in the working group, they looked at some of the recommendations through the eyes of visitors to the city as well. And Stirling relies heavily, its economy relies heavily on the visitor market and tourism, as well as retail. So having that aspect as well from the working group was really, really important as well. So yes, I think it's safe to say that we were really pleased with the report at Stirling Council and look forward to working in the group on an ongoing basis.
Many thanks to Richard Ward, Kevin Harrison and all those who were involved in this project. Hopefully it can inspire other towns and cities to do the same and make local places and spaces safe and welcoming for people with dementia. One more film now from dementia-friendly Dunblane. Before COVID, the project supported individuals living with dementia and their carers with a memory cafe, a singing group and a lunch club, among other things. Since lockdown, like so many others, they have had to adapt their support services. Rita Seaman, the coordinator for Dementia Friendly Dunblane, whom you've seen earlier today, she will tell us more. Some unpaid carers will reflect on their experiences looking after their loved ones, and we'll learn how local children have also played a very big part in helping to keep support going. Over to you, Breda.
Hello, my name is Breda Seaman, and I'm the Project Coordinator for Dementia Friendly Tumbling. We are a group of volunteers who set up in 2017 to create a dementia-friendly community. We have 26 wonderful volunteers who come from all walks of life, and they have been a tremendous asset to our project. We have on our journey to date opened a memory cafe which operates normally weekly. We have contributed to the development of a music and memories music group and a rejuvenate lunch club once a month. During COVID, these volunteers have absolutely been amazing. They have been working tirelessly to provide soup and cake, fish and chips, and lots of other goodies to the elderly members of our community. But it was more than the food that was appreciated. Many of the elderly people were grateful to have a doorstep conversation with another human being, and it has enabled us to stay connected to our cafe attendees. Telephone befriending on weekly by the volunteers picked up any issues that could be dealt with. I would like to pass you on now to some of these wonderful volunteers and carers so that they can share their stories. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Gillian. I'm an unpaid carer for my mum who has Alzheimer's. As a family, we decided we would try and keep mum at home as long as possible, and we would all care for her in our own way. My daughter very kindly moved in with mum when she left school and continued her education at college and stayed with my mum. When my daughter went off to university, I moved in with mum. I was working full-time as well, and mum went to private daycare and also the day centre at Alzheimer's Scotland once a week. And I would stay with mum at night. In lockdown, mum's daycare obviously stopped. Alzheimer's Scotland couldn't provide their social care once a week either, and I was working from home and caring for mum too. It was a lonely and isolating experience, and still can be. Mum's Alzheimer's declined rapidly through lockdown. The lack of social interaction had a real impact on mum, and her vocabulary became quite poor, and her mood became low, and we had incontinence. I sought help and support, but through lockdown I was told that these kind of supports were not a priority, and so I just had to keep trying to find solutions myself. I found out through social media about a local support group called Dementia Friendly Tumbling, who were great. They helped with advice. They had people that had been in my situation or are still in my situation now, and tried to give me solutions that they had tried. They delivered us soup and cake, which was fantastic. It was a real treat. Plus, for me, the person delivering the soup gave me some adult chat at the door, which I'm sure I burnt their ears off with being able to talk to somebody. And I can't thank them enough for the support I got from them. sadly, Mum slipped due to the incontinence and fractured her back, landed in hospital for 3 weeks. Obviously, I could not visit her in those 3 weeks, which was difficult. Then there was a real problem setting up a care package when we got her home. She was obviously in a lot of pain with her back. So it was difficult. Then my mother-in-law became seriously ill and sadly passed away. I needed to be home with my family at that time, and trying to organise respite care for my mum was extremely difficult, as the care homes were not offering respite at all. And eventually I managed to get emergency respite care for Mum. The constant battle for support through lockdown is very draining, and as a carer on your own, you don't get much sleep, and dealing with somebody with dementia is a very full-on task. But again, it was wonderful having that local support through Dementia Friendly Tumbling, and they were there on the end of the phone if I needed somebody to pour my heart out, and they were always willing to help, always willing to try and think of a solution to problems that cropped up.
My name is Varian, and my husband has Alzheimer's, which was diagnosed 5 years ago. It has been a difficult journey, made easier by living in our local supportive community of dementia-friendly Tumbling. Until the start of last year, Peter was able to walk independently into the town to buy the few things he needed, or to sit and have a coffee or lunch. He could do this, and I felt confident that should he get a little confused or need help, people would come to his assistance. He was well known around the town, as he and Breda would go around the shops talking to people working there, explaining about the dementia-friendly campaign and generally raising awareness of dementia. Peter's glamorous assistant Ruby, his dementia assistance dog, all added to the awareness raising. Life changed drastically for everyone last year, but particularly so for those with dementia, and like so many, Peter has deteriorated considerably due to lack of outside stimulation. However, the one bright spark has been the lovely food parcels regularly appearing on our doorstep, always with a bright smile and cheery greeting, all thanks to dementia-friendly Tumbling. Most support groups are for older people, so Breda and I set up the Younger Persons Lunch Group to offer a safe place for younger people with dementia and their carers to come and enjoy some time together. Trying to find your way through the maze of obtaining support is difficult, and you have to be tenacious in seeking information, asking questions and never giving up, even though you are probably exhausted and emotionally wrung out. We managed to get SDS funding from Stirling Council to directly employ assistants for Peter, and that has worked well. However, I struggled for months to get a much-needed review of his original assessment, and in the end contacted a local councillor who managed to get a review arranged within a week. Through all of this, the one constant reassurance has been the support and advice of dementia-friendly Tumbling.
Hi, my name's Sally, and this is mine and my mum's story. We both live in Tumbling in Perthshire, and Mum was diagnosed in 2008 with Alzheimer's dementia. She is also blind. She went from being an independent lady involved in the community and helping others to a scared, confused and lonely individual with increasing memory difficulties. Being given loads of books and books to read when all you want to do is talk about it with someone isn't easy. Time doesn't allow you to read and your emotions don't let you. It has been and continues to be a journey with many challenges and occasional laughs over some of the things that are said. The overarching experience to date is not one of closeness of mother and daughter, caring and love, but of frustration, fighting to get things done, to get answers, and a huge amount of stress. Being a carer to your own mother changes your relationship. My observations over the period so far have been how difficult it is as a family member to get any advice or help. No one helps you, contacts you after a diagnosis, and you have to fight for everything at every turn. It's emotionally, physically, and mentally draining to the point that I stopped work in 2019 as my mental health was pushed to the limit and I had no support. It was a wise decision because that year Mum was in and out of hospital 5 times. loads of misdiagnoses, but we managed to get her out every single time. Through our resilience, our determination, and our home-cooked food. She learned to love that, and we took it in thermos flasks every time. Friends judged, people stepped back. Medical professionals told us to take time to look after myself. Medical professionals told me to take time and look after yourself. Not sure they've ever cared for a person with dementia, because that's impossible. Dementia Friendly Dunblane has been an eye-opener and my lifesaver. I found it in 2018 and Mum started attending with a carer. I'd heard lots about it, so I attended myself and had a great time. It gave us an opportunity to be together as a mum and a daughter again, and we loved that. In 2019, I also volunteered with them and am part of the DFD steering group and then a minute taker as well. I also befriend other carers and other people with dementia and love to support where I can with home-cooked food. That's our story.
Hello, I'm Claire and I'm a volunteer with Dementia Friendly Dunblane. I started volunteering just over 4 years ago when I left my job at a local primary school and I offered to walk small groups of children to our weekly memory cafe. One of the things that struck me immediately was that children neither know nor care who is the person with dementia, who is the volunteer, or who is the carer. They treat everybody equally and they chatted away and they just brought great cheer to the cafe whenever they were there. The second thing that struck me almost immediately was that music has such an amazing effect on people with dementia. And this was something I didn't know before. But if our entertainment was music or movement to music, it seemed to tap into people's lost memories and they would smile and they would sing and they would move to the music and they would clap. And that positive effect continued even after the music had stopped. Well, then, of course, COVID struck. And it came as no surprise to us that our coordinator, Breda, swung straight into action and organised soup and cake twice a week, made by a local cafe and delivered on the doorstep by volunteers. What became very clear to me was that the chat on the doorstep was as important to all of us as the soup and the cake. Wherever possible, I involved children walking around delivering with me because I had seen the positive benefit of having children chatting to older people. So what I would say I have taken from my volunteering is, first of all, the volunteering is totally as important to the volunteer as it is to the recipient. And the other thing is, if you ever are organising volunteering, if you can involve young children, it can bring nothing but joy.
My name is Kain Demanji and has already been explained. I manage About Dementia, which is Age Scotland's forum for people living with dementia and unpaid carers. We work to bridge the gaps between policy and practice in Scotland, and we put people living with dementia absolutely front and centre in all that we do as a project. It's a huge privilege to be here this morning and to be chairing this panel. In addition to my day job, I live in the Forth Valley area. I have lived in Stirling for nearly 20 years now. I was previously involved in research at the University of Stirling that informed the Our Connected Neighbourhoods project, and I know a number of the people involved in the presentations that have been given today. So it's just been wonderful to hear about all the amazing work and what a great platform for the fantastic stuff that's taking place across this area. We may be small, but we absolutely punch above our weight when it comes to this type of thing. So it's lovely to be here today, as I've already said. Before we begin the panel, this is just a reminder that this Q&A session is going to be focusing on the priorities that have been identified by the storytelling sessions that have been taking place over the past couple of weeks. The sessions so far have been involving people who support people living with dementia and unpaid carers as well. There have also been sessions starting for people living with dementia, but these are ongoing. So the priorities reflect the conversations that have taken place so far, but are not the full conversations that are going to take place. So we'll make sure that all of the conversations and the priorities reflect what's taken place today and what is going to be discussed at the future storytelling session. So you'll receive an update in due course and just look out for that in your inbox. So without further ado, we are going to invite our panelists to, by the magic of Zoom, join me. We have a fabulous panel joining us this morning. I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourselves in a minute. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, and we'll then move on to the questions. If you in the audience still have a question that's burning, a comment that you'd like to share, please pop comments in the chat function. Please pop questions in the questions box. And hopefully we can have a bit of an interesting discussion. So I'm going to invite first Nicola. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you. My name is Nicola Wood. I work for NHS Forth Valley. My permanent position is as the Alzheimer's Scotland Dementia Nurse Consultant and lead nurse for older adult mental health services. So it's quite a bit of a mouthful. However, I am currently on secondment into a new role as the lead nurse for care homes.
Wonderful. It's great to have you with us, Nicola, and lots of valid and useful experience with both of your hats on. So we might draw on that this morning. That's great. Next, I'll introduce Daniel. It's lovely to see you, Daniel. It's been a while since I last saw you.
Lovely to see you too. Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel. I'm the Strategy and Engagement Officer for Townbreak Dementia Support Stirling. We are an organisation of 29 years that supports people living with dementia and their carers. And it's been really interesting and rewarding to hear all the stories that have been shared this morning. And I look forward to all the questions.
Lovely. Great to have you with us, Daniel. Next up, we have Paul.
Hi there, I'm Paul and I'm the Client Liaison Officer with Self-Directed Support Forth Valley, and our organisation is there to support people through each stage of the self-directed support journey, even now with the Scottish Government funding that we've got to support them even before they start on that journey, and just explain them the steps that they'll go through and support them through each step. And also if somebody was to potentially go for option one of self-directed support where they would become an employer, we'll support them to actually become an employer, put them in touch with payroll companies and explain employment legislation to them and things like that as well.
That's wonderful. It's great to have you involved. There's already been a little bit of discussion about self-directed support in the chat, so there may be more discussion about that coming up. So it's great to have you along, Paul. Next, we have Natalie.
Hello everyone, I'm Natalie Masterson, the Chief Executive of SVE. SVE is the Development and Partnership Agency for the voluntary sector in Stirling. So we help local groups and charities to develop, access funding and have their voice heard by decision makers. I've got the pleasure of working with the local dementia and carers organisations here in Stirling, including most of the panel here today. And I also sit on the board for the Health and Social Care Partnership.
That's great, Natalie. It's lovely to have you along, and particularly with that perspective from the Health and Social Care Partnership. That's going to be really useful to have you. Also, of course, we are joined by our wonderful co-chairs who have just done such a marvellous job of hosting us this morning. So we have Carice. Would you like to introduce yourself again?
Hi there. I'm currently a student, but I'm also an unpaid carer and I look after my grandmother who's got advanced Alzheimer's dementia.
Lovely. Thank you, Carice. And of course, May.
I'm May Wright. I'm the oldest volunteer with Dementia Friendly Dunblane. My husband had dementia and I cared for him. I extend a hand of compassion to carers. They can tell me exactly how they feel, tell me anything without feeling guilty, because I've been there.
Wonderful. It's great to have you, and thank you both particularly for joining with this panel discussion this morning as well. Also lurking in our virtual background, we have a couple of other people. We have Kevin Harrison from ArtLink Central, who is on hand to answer any questions that relate to the Our Connected Neighbourhoods project, which is one of the videos that you saw earlier. We also have Donna Patterson from Alzheimer's Scotland, who was in the first video that we saw this morning, and she's also very happy to answer questions. And you can also see on screen is Breda Seaman from Dementia Friendly Dunblane. She's there, as you already know, supporting May with the technical side of things, but she's very happy to put that on pause and answer any questions that come in relation to Dementia Friendly Dunblane. So welcome to you all. We are going to kick off just now. We've got about half an hour for this session, which is a nice bit of time. And I'm going to start off with a question that came in advance of today's session, but I think speaks really strongly to the presentations that we've been seeing this morning. And the question is that about communities, the individuals, groups and organisations within them play a key role in reducing the isolation and stigma felt by people with dementia and unpaid carers. Priority 1 shines a light on this. Could the panel share examples of work underway to address this that others can learn from? I'm going to go to Daniel first, I think, from your perspective with Townbreak.
There's a number of things that we've got underway at the moment. Obviously, COVID has proven to be a massive hindrance towards plans that we had with things that we'd have done. But I think moving forward, we need a more coordinated approach to what we're doing, addressing issues and perhaps gaps as well, and not overlapping the work that we're doing. We have previously worked towards that, as with many of the organisations that are here. And there was a number of good work that was underway prior to COVID. For example, I worked with Donna Patterson at Alzheimer's Scotland, where we were trying to identify what services were within the landscape of Stirling and was it addressing the needs of people living with dementia and also their carers as well. So I think moving forward, something similar to that and including a wider variety of people would help us draw our attention towards making sure that we are actually hitting the points that people living with dementia and their carers rely on, and the support that we can give is meeting the needs.
That's great. Thank you, Daniel. I'm going to go to Natalie next, because Natalie, obviously, the third sector has been absolutely central to the response to COVID over the last year. I mean, I think we really saw across Scotland that it was people in communities who just picked things up, pulled up their bootstraps and just got on with things. People exactly like Breda, who just couldn't let everybody go without the support that they rely on every day. And really, we've got a huge amount to thank the third sector for. Have you got any reflections on this particular question around communities?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, first of all, it's important to say what an amazing job the volunteers have done over this period. They've absolutely been the lifeblood of our communities. They've been there as the safety net for many people, including those living with dementia and their carers. I think the question is really interesting because it talks really about what do we want our communities to be like. And during COVID, it's really clear that the place where you live has never been more important. Mm-hmm. And it's at times, looking at the panel, looking at nods and such, it's became not even the village or town you're living in, it's become the streets you're living in, and how you interact with that place. I think in Stirling, we have a really good mix between organisations that are specifically supporting people with dementia and their carers. But we also have a good balance, but we need to get better here at making sure the universal community services, universal community organisations that we have are also inclusive of those with dementia. It's really important that there's that balance between the specialised services that people need and the open, welcoming community groups that we want to see flourishing. Some of the things I'd say there is it's really important to be thinking about asking the question to people with dementia, what does a good life in your community look like? For some people, it might be going along to specialist services, but for other people, it may be making sure that the library is a dementia-friendly space. It may be making sure that there's Otago classes that they can attend. It's going to be different for everyone. And as professionals, but as also volunteers, it's key to have those good conversations about what does it mean for the individual person in their community.
Absolutely. And I think that focus on neighbourhood, that focus on local, that focus on place brings us really nicely to another question that came in on the Q&A function in response to the presentation from Our Connected Neighbourhoods, which is all about the importance of those very immediate close spaces around about people living with dementia, and how do we make spaces open and accessible and empowering for people living with dementia within their communities. So I'm going to pose this to Kevin and ask him to just pop his camera on and come on and answer this one. So the question is, it's great to hear that Stirling Council have embraced the methods and outputs the Our Connected Neighbourhoods project within wider project planning, and it really is fantastic to see the big impact that you've all had. What opportunities do you see for other communities and organisations in Forth Valley to follow this lead and invite people with dementia to help them improve accessibility? So I think this is really talking more about communities within Clackmannanshire and the Falkirk areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the question and the opportunity to answer. So Our Connected Neighbourhoods is Forth Valley wide. And we're currently in a pilot phase of taking our tools that we've been developing with people living with dementia and unpaid carers and our partner agencies over 3 years, and kind of refining them and almost taking a prototype and testing them. So we've got pilot areas at the moment. We're working very closely, particularly with Liz Rowlett from CTSI, on a huge response we've had from Clackmannanshire community. So within Alloa, there's the Access Panel, and then also Dollar Community, the Donna Community Development Trust, have been very keen to kind of pick up the tools and try some of them out between now and the autumn, when our project comes to its kind of next milestone. And then we're also working really closely with Camlin and Tamfor Hill areas, where we've already got some strong relationships through other projects, and it's a real sort of hub of activity at the moment, funded through National Lottery, Our Place funding. There's a whole range of different community groups and organisations, but there's also a huge development with Scottish Canals, and Scottish Canals are looking at it with the same kind of interest that Stirling Council has looked at dementia-friendly audits from an economic development, placemaking and community engagement point of view. So those opportunities there, the tools are all going to be available beyond the use of the project, and we're looking at what a rollout program might be and what kind of ongoing support we can put in place, as well as exploring some of the other things that have come up through the development of the project, like how do you use things like the creative processes and arts to engage people in their local place and community. But wider than that, I think it's worth saying that there is a huge government and I suppose national policy development around neighbourhoods, which really is in keeping with what we're looking at. So the project, the OCN project, has really kind of been inspired and come from the Scottish Place Standard and Place Principles, and those are being rolled out by everybody from Architecture to Design Scotland, the Scottish Government, to local authorities, and also local area planning has a really key way to feature in. So we hope that different communities, wherever they're at in their journey towards being dementia inclusive, can pick up on some of those opportunities, and then also that they can link in, and we can link in all our partners, so that you've got a balance between environment and place and the services and direct support that there is within communities. And I think one final point is to say whether we can look at how care homes can play a really key role in placemaking within local neighbourhoods and open their doors, hopefully once COVID has kind of moved forward and become much more of a hub for people living at home with dementia and their unpaid carers. I hope
that's great. Thank you so much, Kevin. And I think that last point is particularly important, that care homes have tended to feel particularly isolated even before COVID, but there's even more of a challenge now to make sure that they are brought back into our communities, and that the contribution that they make to the local community and the connections that they maintain with the local community continue to shape local communities. So that's great. Taking still the kind of Forth Valley wide perspective, I'm going to come to Paul, and I've got two questions around self-directed support across Forth Valley. One is on the Q&A function, which is from Jerry in Fife from the Stand Group. Hello, Jerry. It's lovely to have you along. And he asks, SDS could be an amazing lifeline to people living with young onset dementia and their families and carers. Unfortunately, it seems to be a postcode lottery as to who qualifies for SDS and what level it is available. So SDS is self-directed support. So that's a way of organising your care so that it is personalised and you have more choice and control over the care that you receive. So the question from Jerry is, what has SDS Forth Valley found difficult with regard to accessing self-directed support for people living with young onset dementia, and has it been successful? And I'm going to pop a little addendum onto that as well, Paul, if I may, because there was another SDS question that came in advance, which is about current approaches to personalised support and how are they improving the experiences across the Forth Valley area?
Yep, sure. Well, with regard to the pre-question, first of all, the one that came in advance, I had a bit of time to think about that one. So, and I kind of, actually, without giving a total history lesson, I thought actually to answer that question about the current approaches, it's maybe worthwhile having a wee look back in time of how things used to be. And bearing in mind that all this with the Self-Directed Support Act from 2013 and stuff all came about through over 40 years of the independent living movement. And I was just looking at a wee timeline slide that we use in one of our presentations, and it's quite interesting that back in, 1981 to 1984, they were looking at moving away from institutions and into the community. Now, when you're my age, 1980 was like 2 days ago in my head, you know what I mean? So, but 1980 is still quite relatively recent if you think about it in the scheme of things, and we were still thinking people in institutions rather than community, and it was the old medical model back then as well, where people did things to you rather than with you and for you, so in a way, how have things improved? I'd say when you compare that over time, hugely, because people are now involved and it's about things being how you want them to be. Does that mean it's perfect? No, it doesn't. Is there still a long way to go? Definitely. But I suppose if you put it in the scope of things, that it's taken nearly 40 years to get where we are now, it's probably not, things have improved hugely, but things didn't change just overnight either, So the mechanisms are there now, I would say. What we have to do is improve on those mechanisms. And thankfully, in respect to that, as well, as you probably know in the panel, there's been a review into self-directed support by the Scottish Government. And there's also been standards introduced as well. So hopefully that going forward will definitely improve things. So is there good examples of personalisation? Yes, there is. And I have seen it, where people have been able to take the budget directly and use that not just for carers coming in, which again was very much the sort of kind of concept in the past that you will get carers coming in and that's kind of the end of it. I've seen very good examples where people are taking the budget and they're doing things like going to art groups. If their outcome was to stay fit and healthy, they're getting gym memberships and things like that. So it's not just all about carers coming in. So it is becoming much more personalised. So there is good examples out there. But, and this ties into the question that's just came in as well, Postcode Lottery. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are aware, like in the Forth Valley area particularly, if you stay in the depths of rural Stirling, like even in option 3, getting a provider put in place by the council, it's probably going to be a struggle because there's maybe not a lot of providers in the area. But there is now the option of you taking control of that, maybe not taking the budget, but just taking control of it and maybe finding a provider yourself. So you can maybe, say, for example, if you lived in Killin, you could maybe go cross-border into Perth and find a provider in Perth that could come to Killin easier than maybe one in, Stirling town centre. And you can pick that provider and you can go back to the social work department and say, I want to use option 2. This is a provider I want to use, but you don't need to deal with the budget because the council will enter into an agreement with them as well, and they'll manage the budget and pay the provider. So all you've done is found the provider, but you might be able to speed that process up by thinking a bit more inventively and looking at Perth rather than looking at Stirling just to get the cross-border sort of things. So has it moved on? Is there opportunity there to personalise it? Definitely. Is it perfect? Definitely not. Like so with ourselves, we're now thankfully starting to sit on review boards and things like that on particularly with Stirling Council, and we have a very, very good look at folk. That we'll hopefully be able to feed into some of the stuff that goes on now as well, and try to help make those improvements. I can't really speak specifically dementia, purely and simply because obviously our remit is right across the board, so we're dealing. So I can't say that I've had lots of young dementia particularly. But I think it's just the same problems would probably apply. The postcode lottery thing, as you say, that depends on the services in the area and things like that.
Right.
Again, trying to personalise that, there is option 1 there is option 2 there. There are certain things you can do if you just think out the box, and hopefully services like ours can help you think outside the box as well.
Great, thank you very much, Paul. I'm going to go to Nicola on this topic area, but just bring in some of the conversation that has been taking place on the chat. We've had a comment from Kevin. Imagine if we planned our self-directed support journey so that if we had a diagnosis of dementia, we might design the types of services we might lead later on so that contracts are ready to go when we needed them. And, picking up on what Paul has mentioned around option 2, that's really what that area was about. We have a really strong public health preventative agenda in the NHS in Scotland, but that doesn't seem to be quite coming through in integration of health and social care. What's your experience of this area, Nicola?
So my experience, similar to Paul, we've obviously seen it evolve over the last few years, which has been great. However, I have come in contact with numerous people who have used self-directed support, and the outcomes have just been so amazing to hear. Mm-hmm. We've had people who had a traditional package of care that were coming, 3 times a day, but they were coming at set times. And, one of the experiences that was shared with me that will always stick with me is, the latest call at night time to assist somebody into bed was at 7:30 at night, when the person was used to going to their bed at, 10:30, 11. And the impact that had on somebody's sleep pattern and then their quality of life during the day. So when they were offered the opportunity for self-directed support, they were able to, significantly change that support that was going in and have that built around them and their routine. And the feedback that we got from the gentleman with dementia and his wife was just, it was really heartwarming. And the reason why it will stick with me is that they had says that he wouldn't have been able to live at home for as long as he did if he didn't have this personalised support. And that is what all of our priorities are, is keeping people within their home, within their community, connected to their relationships and things for as long as possible. And the fact that they were able to make some changes to the support that they were receiving had such an impact on them. That's, I think we all need to advocate for self-directed support. And I suppose it's just about making people aware that that's the option and allowing them to have an informed choice. And for me, coming from a health background, I am aware of the fact that there's probably some health professionals that don't fully understand it. So when they're having conversations and maybe aren't, discussing it in a full manner. And I think from us, that's where we need to get better. We need to make sure that every interaction we're having with people, we're fully explaining the options that's available to people, so we can have more of those outcomes for people.
Absolutely. And I think as Paul was saying, the structures and processes are all in place, but there does seem to be a bit of a bottleneck when it comes to people who could do with additional support and aren't able to get it. I'm going to move the conversation on slightly because we've had a couple of other questions popped into the question function, and I'm going to pull these two questions together. So there's one from Richard, who'd like to ask the panel what they think the longer term implications of COVID will be for people living with dementia and what can be done to build back better in terms of services, support and communities. But there's also, related to that, a specific question for May and Breda about what support Tumbling Memory Cafe need to get opened as quickly as possible. So I'll go to the two of you first.
I think the support that we need actually is guidance coming out, from government on when we can open such facilities. If we stick currently to the 6 people from 2 households, if you've got 2 volunteers, you can bring maybe one other family. So really, to open up your whole service for just such a small number it's a lot of work. So our workaround to that, hopefully weather permitting, is we will have small bubbles in the sensory garden, and what we'll do is we'll invite them the day before, look at the weather forecast, and then have selected groups of people to invite along. There is just no guidance at the moment for groups like ours, when you can set up.
Yeah, and that is a huge challenge for various different sectors. Is there a sense, Breda and May, and I'm going to bring Carissa in on this as well, because I know that there's been a lot of hesitancy, certainly prior to the vaccine, about coming back to public spaces and mixing in communities again. Now that people have started getting vaccines, we're starting to see the efficacy of those coming through. How are people feeling about starting to reopen again once the rules permit that?
Well, personally, I haven't been in Stirling, the centre, since the first COVID 2020. And I'm looking forward to going in and having a look at all the signage and the improvements that have been made since I was last there. But even now, my family are not keen for me to go into Stirling. I go across to Marks and Spencer's now, which I hadn't done, all the time. But I now managed to get across to Marks and Spencer's. But apart from that, there's nothing much else, rather than Zoom meetings and Breda, and also helping to deliver the soup and the afternoon teas and the fish suppers. Everyone's most grateful. I live in a block of retirement flats, but they're all self-owned, and there are 37 flats here. So Breda and Billy, they deliver the fish suppers and things to the door downstairs, and another lady and myself, we take them round because some people aren't able to come out of their flats. So we take them round. But the most important thing of anything we deliver or go to their door at any time is to have the blether. That's what they want. They want to have a blether, and sometimes it's very difficult to get away from them.
And that's what we all miss, isn't it?
Help of the Boys Brigade, the weekends with the afternoon teas and that. They deliver, because a lot of them, they're needing some hours for their Duke of Edinburgh award. So that helps them that way. Usually a dad brings down 1 or 2 of them. And sometimes they can manage to go around and speak with some of the older people too.
That's great. Carice, from that intergenerational perspective,
right.
You'll be wanting to go back to uni eventually and, mix with your friends and live that student life and have all those experiences. But how are you feeling about balancing that with caring for your gran and being at home with the family and that balance that you've got in place?
Yeah, I think I'd still be very apprehensive to take like my gran anywhere, because obviously she's not got any concept of the pandemic or knows what COVID is. So getting her to wear a mask or things like that is just like, there's no way. So that's why I think we're so lucky to have dementia friendly Tumbling in Tumbling, and that a lot of the times those services can come to us and interaction can come to us. But yeah, I mean, there's not much guidance for students about returning to university and being on campus and things like that. So I guess we just have to wait and see. And like Breda says, wait for the clarity for what those restrictions will be and what the guidance will be.
Fantastic. Right. I'm being told that I've got time for just one last question, and this is open to the whole panel. So I'm going to go to that first. Can you tell us how the priorities and learning from today's conference might influence local dementia policy and planning work? For example, is there dementia strategy work underway in Forth Valley? I'm going to come to Natalie on this one first, and then please pop your hands up and give me a wave and I'll bring you in.
Andy, my internet just went a little bit wonky at that part. Could you just repeat that for me?
Absolutely, Natalie.
Sorry about that.
Can you tell us about how priorities and learning from today's conference might influence local dementia policy and planning work?
Thank you very much, and hopefully my internet will behave itself while I answer this. I think the first thing I'm going to do today is to discuss this with my colleagues in the Health and Social Care Partnership, take these priorities and feed them into the discussions that we're having there. Many discussions around how we can improve self-directed support, how we can improve participation and engagement, so that we're really hearing not just once a year, but continually the voices of people living with dementia and their carers and how we can improve things. And you've absolutely got my support that I will do that tirelessly with yous, not for yous.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Natalie. And Nicola, from an NHS perspective.
Yeah, so this has came along at a really opportune time for us. We have just recently had a project commissioned to look at the Dementia Pathway as a whole. So it's quite a large project that will take into account various organisations, service users, carers, experience, etc. What we're planning on doing is looking at the pathway from pre-diagnosis, so when people first get symptoms, to when they have their diagnosis, and then the various stages and support requirements after that. The project team will chunk down each element of the pathway and really explore any barriers or areas for improvement at those different elements of the pathway, and look to standardised processes. So what we were talking about earlier about postcode lotteries, we're wanting to get away from that, obviously, in the Forth Valley area. And the finished article should hopefully have a step-by-step pathway in terms of what you would expect to receive in terms of support or experiences throughout your dementia diagnosis, regardless of which area of Forth Valley that you live in. So it's a big piece of work, but the stories that's came through and the priorities that have been shared are so rich, and it's just excellent feedback that's been able to be obtained that absolutely should be built into this pathway. So it was supposed to be myself leading on it, but obviously my change in job has changed things, but there's somebody coming into post to my position, so I will make sure that this is obviously all handed over and that the project team really take it on board when they're looking at the pathway.
That's great to hear, and really good to hear that the priorities from the discussions that we've been having today will be getting fed back in, and an opportunity to think about how we can involve people directly with lived experience, so we can have some really concrete impacts from the work that we've all been doing today. So thank you for that. May, you wanted to come in?
Yes, I just want to mention my experience of the difference befrienders make. A big difference. I have a case study here, but there's no time. But I've seen the difference a befriender can make. But
Absolutely.
We need befrienders to come in, because a lot of families, they dump their old relative in this building and think that the manager will look after her. But the manager is only here to look after the actual building and the environs. So she's not able to do anything otherwise. And some of these poor old souls are just left. We've even had one that in the first week when he was here, we had the police here twice and we had the fire brigade once. That's how bad the situation was, locked in his flat, unable to open and different things. So, I mean, we want to help people as much as possible, but befrienders are definitely needed badly.
Absolutely. And that peer support that people can get from other people living with dementia and other unpaid carers as well. Paul, you'd like to come in, and then I'm just going to give a little bit of space for Daniel to come in and say a final word before we close.
No, all I was going to say, I noticed Gail from Townbreak has put in the chat about like working together and the idea of the information hub and the other priority in that. And at one point or another, I think every organisation that's on the panel, likewise, our organisation's had some dealings with them at some time as well. And I think now that COVID is finally winding itself down and we're all starting to wind ourselves back up, I think I have to agree totally with Gail. It's the working together and and the sharing the knowledge and things like that, I think is definitely the way forward and will lead to better services throughout the area.
Definitely, and I think that's something that we've seen grow in the past 4 or 5 years in the Stirling area, and I think everybody is getting a lot better at is kind of that information sharing, and certainly within Stirling. But it would be great to see that starting to happen across the 3 local authorities within this area. Daniel, do you want to build in at all on anything that Gail has said in the chat?
Yeah, thank you. I think it is very important, following on from Natalie and Nicola's comments around self-directed support, to understand how that is built on and how the money can be used as well. For example, I don't think a lot of people understand that their budget could be used to access Townbreak services as well, which provide a whole range of support from care support, people living with dementia, befriending. We have an umbrella of so many different services that allow people to interact, share knowledge, experience, and make them feel not so alone as well. So I think that's one of the crucial things that's been shining for me throughout this whole Zoom that we've been on.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. I'm afraid that is all we've got time for this question and answer session, but please keep the conversation going in the chat, and do please keep these conversations going after this conference. I think this has been a really wonderful opportunity to showcase all of the great work that is going on in this area and the real richness of experiences, and feed that in to make sure that is being listened to at a strategic level. So that's really good. But those conversations can't just stop here. They do need to continue. I'm going to thank all of the panelists hugely for your time this morning and for taking part. Great session. Thank you all very much for taking part. Next, I'm very happy to welcome back to the screen Arlene Crockett from the Life Changes Trust, who's going to talk about the small grants programme that the Trust has been running, and also a little bit about those crucial next steps following today's event and how we can make sure that we harness all the potential and all the enthusiasm that we've generated this morning into making really big changes locally. So I'll hand over to Arlene, and thank you all very much.
Thanks, Kayindi. What a fantastic discussion. Ably chaired by yourself, so thank you very much for that. As Kendi said, I'm going to talk about a few things before I hand over to our fantastic co-chairs, May and Carice, to finish today's webinar. So first of all, I'm going to start with a funding alert. I'm sorry, I don't have a flashing screen or a buzzer or anything to sound, but just to say that the small grants for Forth Valley, which have been open now for nearly 6-7 weeks, I think, close tomorrow for applications. So these are small grants for local groups and organisations to apply for between £2,000 and £15,000 for projects and programmes of work in the local area. So that can be maybe some work that adds value to what they're already providing, or it might be some kind of new idea that they want to develop. And it's also an opportunity for new groups to maybe apply for funding where they've never done that before. So we're encouraging you, if you're in the middle of an application and you're finishing it off, just to think about the deadline being tomorrow at 5 o'clock. So we've got a few applications in, but we're expecting much more. So just a bit of a reminder around, get your application in so that you can hopefully benefit from this funding. These grants will be assessed by our funding team, and we will also draw on a local panel of experts. So we will have people with dementia, unpaid carers, and some of our local partners that will be part of a panel that will then make the decisions on who is awarded the grants. So we just keep that focus on local, which has been a really key theme throughout this morning's webinar. The other thing is that we will, as part of the funding for Forth Valley, also appoint a learning network coordinator. Their role is really to bring those awardees together as a group, and to allow them to inform and share learning as a partnership. And again, just building on that sharing of information, that connection to the benefit of beneficiaries in the local area. So there'll be more information about who that will be very soon as well. So funding alert over, so get your applications in, or if you've not aware of the funding, Colm's put a link I think in the chat, so get your applications in as quickly as possible. Okay, so as I say, what a fantastic morning we've had. We've had some really very honest and very emotional experiences shared about the impact, particularly for unpaid carers now and throughout the pandemic, which has really, I think, opened our eyes to the really difficult things that have been happening and what people are having to cope with, but also the resilience that is around and the support that very much local communities have provided people both during the pandemic and moving forward. And I think that focus on local has been a really key thread of today's conference. From what Nicola said and in the Q&A, you know, it's important, where you live is important, and more so now than ever. I think what we want to talk about in this small section is the importance of the event, the importance of the learning that's been shared, the evidence that we have gathered to make this event happen, and also those priorities that I presented earlier on this morning, because this isn't the end of the conversation. This is the start of a new conversation. We want this event to be a platform, a springboard for learning to be taken forward. As someone mentioned earlier on, there was lots of learning before the pandemic and lots of plans in place, but the pandemic has changed that and has shifted that, and we need to take on board how that has changed, particularly for people with dementia and unpaid carers, and look at how we revisit plans and revisit recovery moving forward. So it's brilliant to hear that Nicola and Natalie are going to be taking that learning forward within their own organisations and their own with their own stakeholders and key people that make those decisions. Because although we need the support for that to be driven forward, we also need to make sure that the support is taken into account at that kind of high level, strategic level, where decisions are made, where money is allocated, and where budgets are designed. So it'll be really good to see how those priorities reflect that. Partnerships have been renewed, I think, as a result of this event. It was brilliant in the planning groups to see lots of different organisations coming together to design the event, to develop what they want the programme to look at, and to very much reflect and be inclusive of people with dementia and unpaid carers. And it was brilliant to have May on our planning group, as well as Carice's mum Gillian. So many thanks to them, and many thanks to those other organisations and key stakeholders that were doing that. I think at the event we have seen the chat going, you know, at a great pace, offers of support, connection, contacts, you know, people reflecting on how well supported they are, but also others reflecting on what else needs to happen and what improvements need to be made. And you know, some really key points there around SDS and around that idea of a community hub and the importance of that within local communities moving forward. So it'll be good to see what comes out of some of those questions and how they might inform some of that work. I think for me, just reflecting on the day, it's, you know, I think there's been some really powerful testimonies shared from carers and from people who have used services. It's been good and important to see the important role of communities and that focus on local, which is run right through, and, you know, the great support that local supports like Dementia Friendly Dumbling, our Connected Neighbourhood, the Dementia Resource Centre in Alloa, and also Townbreak have played in the lives of people receiving that support. So we want that to continue, and we want to build on that, because the heart of all this is care, as we discussed as part of the priorities, and care is at the heart of everything that we do, and we all have a commitment and a want and a need to continue that. So this is my call to action to you as part of this webinar. Use the learning, use the discussion, use the debate to inform your own work, whether you're an individual living in a community, whether you're someone living with dementia, an unpaid carer, use the learning that you've seen today, whether you're part of a small group or organisation that wants to utilise it, then do that, take it away, whether you're part of a bigger organisation, you're in the NHS, you're in the local authority. Everybody has a responsibility to do something with what they've heard today, and we would welcome you to take that forward and use the learning. All of it will be put onto our website. Everything's recorded today. There'll be a full recording of the website there for you to access openly. Each presentation will be put on separately as well as the priorities, so you can take away whatever learning you feel is meaningful and important for the work that you're doing. We want to give you as many tools to be able to use what we have developed in partnership locally with stakeholders for Forth Valley. We will also have a full and detailed report from the Village Storytelling Centre with respect to the sessions that have taken place so far and the additional sessions we hope to have, so that there's more context around those priorities and you can actually see in more detail what was expressed and the examples that people shared in terms of the experiences of their lives. So lots of tools, lots of evidence, lots of learning to be able to utilise. I think the priorities are rich and I think they have meaning and they have legacy, and we will be happy to support anybody around discussions within their own organisations about how they may be taken forward. We have many examples of how those priorities have influenced change locally. Examples coming from places like Orkney, where we did an event in 2019 where the priorities and learning from their event have now shaped their local dementia strategy, which was launched in September 2020. We already are seeing discussions happening in Fife. It's great to see a question from Jerry, the stand group, and the event there and the priorities that have been shaped in the learning is now informing how they move forward with their local dementia strategy. And more recently, an event in Tayside has now stimulated and encouraged partners in the Angus Health and Social Care Partnership to do similar work. So lots of examples of how positive moving forward can take place as a result of these events. And we would encourage anybody to have a conversation with us at the Trust if they want to be connected with some of those other areas to hear more about the work that's underway. And then finally, before I hand back to Mary and Carice, I just want to say a huge thanks to Mary and Carice. Having chaired, and I'm sure many join me in this, having chaired events both face-to-face and online in particular, it's not an easy task. There's a lot to do, there's a lot to remember. You've got to be focused on at what point you speak and time and everything. And to do that whilst doing so many other commitments that they have, I take my hat off to them, and they've done an amazing job this morning. So my thanks personally and on behalf of the Life Changes Trust to May and Carice for their co-chairing roles today. We learn a lot from people like Carice and May and the other beneficiaries, people with dementia and unpaid carers that have co-chaired our other events. So many thanks to them, and we will take a lot away from today, and I hope they've enjoyed it as much as we've enjoyed watching them co-chairing. And now, without further ado, I am now going to hand back to Carice and May, they are going to now close today's webinar. So over to you.
Thank you, Arlene, and of course to Kindy for chairing our Q&A session. So we're now at the end of today's conference. It's been a pleasure for us to chair, and we hope everyone has enjoyed it and will take away some learning from today.
We would like to thank all of our speakers and all of our panel members today. We are very grateful for all the work you are doing and for taking time to join us. And thank you to everyone in Forth Valley who is continuing to support communities and create better lives.
We will email everyone with a link to the recording of this event in a week or so, and we will also let everyone know when the local priorities have been updated with the sessions that are still underway. Thank you all for supporting the conference, and I hope it's got you all thinking about how we together can create better lives in the future.
So there's really only one thing left for us to say, and that's goodbye and have a lovely day.
Thank you all so much. Goodbye.